I've just started recording, so
Oh, okay.
because I know you've only got an hour. So,
Yeah,
how are
no
you doing?
worries.
How are you doing? Good to see you. There's no delay on the line, so that's good. Show you my tree.
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Oh, you got the tree there? Oh,
Yeah,
nice. Is it, is it getting cold now?
it's wet and windy,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. Here it's dry and freezing. It's
Is it?
yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting into the depths of it soon.
Well, it's great to see you, and thanks so much for agreeing to come on the channel.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah. No worries.
I don't know if you saw my first episode with Rebecca. But I have a series of other interviews lined up.
Oh,
One will probably go live before this one goes live. So, and I kind of outlined the kind of things that I'm interested in talking about. And so perhaps if you could just, for the people who are just starting to follow me, if you could just kind of introduce yourself, and I'll post the link to our interview from, was it last year or earlier this year? Earlier this year, wasn't it?
yeah.
I'll post that down below so people can kind of get a bit of context.
Sure. So I've been a carnivore now for about 3.5 years, and about 4 months into being a carnivore, I realized how much it was helping me, and I wanted to talk about it. So I set up a YouTube channel to talk about it, just share my experience, and through that, I kind of decided, it'd be nice to get into, do some networking with other carnivores. I live in Japan, so I'm pretty isolated, and so I started going on live streams with other carnivores and meeting them and that kind of thing. And my channel's just grown from there. And now I've got about 1,500 interviews with carnivores on there.
Awesome. And can you describe a bit about your own health journey? Because I know you've had some problems in
Yeah,
earlier years with, is it
yeah, sure.
arthritis?
Yeah. So I I fell into carnivore from keto, and I was doing keto to control a drinking problem and also to deal with my pre-diabetes, or try and deal with my pre-diabetes. And prior to doing keto, my diet had been pretty bad. It had been pretty much strictly ultra processed. And so I started doing keto, and as part of that, I was incorporating this small amount of veggies into every meal. And I realized something. I realized that plants were indeed trying to kill me. And, these assassination attempts would happen pretty much after every meal. And so I thought, well, this is not good. And I went searching for answers, realized there was a lot of people out there that were saying, well, actually, you don't need to eat the vegetables, and these ones are particularly bad. They've got lectins, they've got all these kind of things. And I thought, well, I'm not married to these vegetables. So I was only eating them because I thought I had to. So I'm going to give them away and see what happens. And I gave them away, and keto became carnivore, and the problems I was having stopped, and also so many other things improved for me. Of course, like everyone else, the energy, the sleep gets better, brain fog lifts, all that kind of thing. But a couple of big things for me were the arthritis I had in my left knee just went away after a couple of months, and also the symptoms I had from a stroke that I suffered when I was 17 started to get better,
What
and
were
that
those? What were those symptoms, would you say?
so down my right side, my strength, I've got less strength on my right side despite being right-handed, um, and like I limp, and it's weaker, and when I get tired, it gets more pronounced, that kind of thing. And those things started to improve. The balance started to get better. I wasn't limping as much. And it's always going to be there. I've had a stroke. It's never going to get to be 100%, but it's much improved. And so is with the arthritis going on my left side, the stroke symptoms getting better on my right side. I feel almost human again. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. And it's kind of the opposite of what you would expect getting older. You expect these things to get worse, don't you? You don't expect
Right,
them
right.
to improve.
Yeah, it's just like, once you hit 40, you start thinking, "Oh, the time seems to be getting a bit faster," and then you get to 50 and it's like, "Okay, well, it's really just downhill from here."
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be that way.
I mean, it's great to hear. And I've seen one of your videos, I think, where you jump down the stairs. It's a short that you put on.
Yeah.
You jump
I
down.
I
And my
I
son does that
think,
every morning.
on on consideration now, looking back on it, I probably wouldn't make a habit of that. I think you're still aging, so I think, it probably is not the best thing to do a jump like that regularly, but, yeah, it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
No, it was great to see. You could see the excitement on your face, from. So, I wanted to talk to you. I said to Rebecca
Mm,
and a couple of the other people that I've spoken to, I want to try and move the conversation forward a little bit away from. Well, so I became a qualified carnivore coach through Peter and Eddie Goki's
right.
um, training course.
Mm,
And so, I'm still interested in the nutrition side and coaching. But I'm an architect, as you know, and I was
mm,
kind of keen to. They're doing that job so well in rebutting all the nutrition misinformation online.
right,
It's not. I'll leave them to do that, because they're so good at it. Um, I'm obviously interested in continuing my learning journey with regards to nutrition and just becoming, better at understanding all the nuance. But
right,
I just thought it might be nice to try to move the conversation into a different space so that, I can kind of contribute something, and where it relates to architecture,
right.
thinking about how can I best support the idea of a carnivore lifestyle? And I mentioned the NEP estate when I spoke to you on our last
Oh,
chat,
yeah, yeah.
and you kindly put some photographs
Mm.
of the NEP estate on the. You mix those in, um, and so I was chatting with Rebecca about her health journey and how her environment has helped her overcome or reduce the symptoms of her MS. And I suppose I'm interested in just understanding a little bit more about. Perhaps you've talked about it on your channel, but I haven't seen. I think you did a segment with one other person where you went round looking at restaurants. Was it? I'm keen to get an idea of what it's
In
like in
Japan?
Japan. Yeah, what it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in Japan. Getting meat. Is it regeneratively farmed?
Um,
And dispelling some of, perhaps I put on my list of things to talk to you about, dispelling the blue zone myth. Perhaps we'll
so
start there.
yeah, so, regarding the blue zones,
Yeah, we'll start there,
yeah.
shall we?
So, yeah, it's just crap, the blue zones is basically a trademark that's owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church now, it's just a marketing tool. It's, you know, um, we I my Japanese is not great, so I enlisted the help of a friend, another YouTuber, to go to do some interviews with Japanese people, um, and go around and, ask them if could you give up meat? And how much meat do you eat in a week, right? And they're all like, "No, I couldn't give that up. No, no, no." And there was a couple that said, I should, I'm trying to eat just vegetables now, or I'm trying to eat more vegetables and all this kind of thing. But they're people that think, because they're brainwashed the same way that we are everywhere else, that if they eat vegetables, they're going to lose weight and it's better for their health, right? Um, so yeah, like Japanese people, if you can actually, like, you can do a Google image search of Okinawa, um, Okinawa markets or Okinawa arcades and stuff like that, right? And you'll just see pork products everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And apparently it's a blue zone. Well, what does a blue zone mean? I have a contact on LinkedIn. He's a Australian guy, but he lives in Japan, and he does coaching with Japanese people. And he had a Okinawan guy complaining to him about how every time American or Australian tourists come into, or Canadian tourists come into his shop in Okinawa, they're all going, "This is a blue zone, right?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" So it's like the Seventh-day Adventist Church has actually, like, pushing their culture on another culture because it suits them monetarily or theologically or whatever you want to say. So
Yeah.
yeah, blue zones are garbage.
So I went to Japan when I was 16 or 17 with the Scouts. I stayed with two Japanese families for a period of about 10 days. And it was part of a world jamboree that I did with the Scouts that I was lucky enough to get chosen for. And my time, I remember going to a couple of restaurants and getting sushi for the first time. And it was just a piece of fish with a little pile of ginger next to it. And that always stuck in my mind because, in Britain, we're so used to having, vegetable accompaniments, meat and two veg. And so for a 16-year-old who'd grown up like that, it was odd. That was a cultural kind of shift, for me, it was odd to just see a piece of fish. And,
Right.
when, I know the Blue Zone thing, when I've been to Greece, I've got a lot of Greek friends. And I remember staying with one of my Greek friends' parents, and his dad had just a big pile of fish, fried. Um, Again, and yeah, the people that I've spoken to in Greece, meat is it's a big part of the diet in Greece.
Yeah.
And also all the kinds of meat that we wouldn't eat, or would turn our nose up at, eyeballs, brains,
Right, right, right.
testicles, the whole shebang. Um,
Yeah,
and so it does feel just ridiculous, some of the narratives that are being pushed. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, what's it like in terms of the quality of the meat? And because my experience of Japan was just it was such a densely populated city. I went to Osaka.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where I live. Yeah.
Is it? Ah, yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, so
Mm.
I wonder if you could give us a glimpse into what it's like living there. Do people keep pets like they do in Britain, and how close are you to kind of nature?
Um, well, in Osaka, there is a tree. So, um, there's not, unless you travel, there's not a lot of nature,
Mm.
unless you can say concrete comes from nature. um, yeah, there's a lot of concrete. And Osaka is, of all the cities in Japan, Osaka is the one that feels like the town planners, they'd done all the other cities, and then it was like really early in the morning, they'd been up all night, they've had their coffees and whatever, and they go, just whatever, just put some concrete on it. So it's a little bit like that. If you drive in from the airport, it looks like scenes from like Blade Runner or something like that. It's pretty dystopian looking when you arrive here. It's a great city, but it's pretty dystopian looking coming in from the airport. Um, but yeah, there's not much in the way of nature. There's sun, but there's not. People say you should do some grounding. I'm like, where?
Where? Yeah, where?
On my balcony. Um, so yeah, it's as I
I mean,
say, there's a tree.
The Japanese are famous, aren't they, for their gardens, Japanese gardens.
Yeah.
And, you know, the idea that if you don't have a garden, you can always make a garden somehow using rocks and gravel
Mm-mm-mm.
and they, you know, lots of Japanese people, as I understand it, you know, have these small gardens on the windowsill or something that represents a garden even. So, I mean, their connection, spiritual connection to nature is quite strong, I would say. That's
Oh,
the way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and, you know, the Japanese people are not religious, but, they're, if you could call it say they had a religion, the closest thing they probably have to it is like an animism kind of thing, you know, where they appreciate the nature and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of, I've got lots of architectural books, obviously.
Mm.
And one is by a German architect called Bruno Taut. I don't know how you pronounce his name, actually.
Uh-huh.
Um, and he did a 2-year trip to Japan. And at
Uh-huh.
the time, he kind of talks about how the Japanese architecture and culture was shifting. You know, they were aspiring to be more westernized, and
Mm.
all that as a bad thing. And he spent 2 years traveling around um, and staying in traditional Japanese houses.
Right.
You know, and it's a beautiful book actually, and it's just so nicely written. And he talks about every little detail, from the stature, you know, the height of the Japanese at the time, you know, to the fact that they have no. It was such a, you know, back. It was written in the 30s or 20s, and so you know, people didn't know about Japan. It was really new to them. Um,
Right, right.
and you know, the way he talks about the tea ceremony and the way that they kneel. They don't have furniture in the old traditional houses.
Mm.
And I thinking about when he talks about the kimono and how heavy it is, and they were getting quite cold in their Western, you know, clothing,
Right.
and uh, and then once they were given the kimono, because the guests they realised that the guests were getting cold, they realised how much warmer it was, and that therefore, you know, the house made more sense because obviously with paper walls it was freezing cold.
Yeah,
Um,
and that hasn't changed even with modern building standards. It's still
really.
freezing inside. Yeah, yeah. There's no like they. I don't know if it's something to do with fires or earthquakes or something, but they don't really put insulation into the places.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding, having looked at some of the buildings, you can tell, you know, that,
Mm.
um, I think lots of architects here probably just love the freedom that you get from that, because the design of the houses is, or the good ones, you know, the architecturally significant ones.
Mm.
It's kind of a freedom that comes from not having to worry too much about, um, leaky buildings, air tightness and
Oh yeah.
ventilation. You know, you can just
Mm.
let your mind go free with the materials. Um, but what I loved and I always have loved about the old traditional buildings is their connection with nature back in those days. Obviously, it's changing.
Mm.
That's kind of being lost a little bit, but
Mm.
um, you know, with the paper walls, they had. Um, there's some famous architects. One, Kengo Kuma, he talks about how in Japan, you know, we don't think about windows as like a window in the wall, like they do in Europe. You know, we think of a roof, and we don't really think of walls. We just open the paper screens up to the
Right,
landscape.
right.
So
Yeah.
that connection with nature is really strong in the
Mm.
buildings.
The interesting thing here is, you like I have a couple of Facebook groups that I'm subscribed to that just show you like these old houses for sale in Japan.
Right.
And like they're a steal. They're like these kind of houses you're talking about, like with the, you know, kind of atrium in the middle, kind of outside garden kind of thing that you just open the paper doors and all that kind of stuff. And you pick them up for, they're called Akia, like they're
Yeah.
abandoned, and you pick them up for like 20, 30,000 US dollars, right?
Yeah.
But they're in the middle of nowhere. Like you know, you probably have to drive 2 hours to get to a small supermarket or something, but, I mean, there's so many of these things because as the population declines and that kind of thing, and people move closer to the cities and stuff like that, they're just getting abandoned.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I haven't actually compared Britain and Japan, but I think we're kind of similar size-wise, aren't we?
There's a lot
Um,
of similarities between Britain and Japan.
yeah, and even the
Yeah.
climate,
Mm.
possibly. I see land prices in Britain just skyrocketing, really. So it's becoming harder to find plots of land.
Mm.
If you wanted to build in the countryside. Uh, so that's interesting to hear that it's not like that in Japan. But I mean, we'd still have problems with people moving away from the very remote villages, in Scotland, away from
Mm.
the city. I think that's still a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, the interesting thing here, it's changing a little bit in the last 5 or so years, but outside of Tokyo, including big cities like Osaka and Kyoto and places like that, um, buying land here is like buying a car. Soon as you buy it, it's losing value.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I say, it's changing a little bit because there's a lot of foreign investment coming in. You know, there's a lot of Chinese people, for example, buying apartments and that kind of thing in Japan. So that's kind of keeping prices a little bit higher. But yeah, I think it's because Japan's been through like 3 decades of deflation. Like, yeah, buying a house is like buying a car.
And what about pets? Do the Japanese keep pets like the Brits do?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, they're smaller. You know, you typically got your toy poodles and
Yeah.
that kind of thing, right? But occasionally you'll see someone walking around with an Afghan hound or a Labrador, and you think, where do you keep that? Because the apartments are tiny.
Yeah. I remember when
Yeah,
I visit. I remember
is
the size of the television was in the kitchen. It was one of the places I stayed was lovely family. Dad and his son lived together. I think his son was 2 years older than me at the time, which was a bit awkward because I think he was hoping I'd be older so I could go drinking with him.
right.
I was too young. Uh, but they had a very small apartment. But what was fascinating for me, even then, even though I wasn't into architecture at the time, was despite them really loving the whole Western culture and trying to impress me
Mm.
as to how the size of their television, which they had a huge television in a very small kitchen diner. It was tiny flat, and they had the typical kind of Japanese toilet, which was like a complete mystery to me at the time. With all the buttons on it,
It's like you got to be a
and
computer programmer to use a toilet.
yeah. But one of their rooms was still dedicated for meditation, so they had no bed in there.
Oh, wow.
Dedicated, meditation space. So with the tatami
Mm,
mats, I remember the bath that they had was one of these big Japanese baths that you sit in, and
mm.
everybody shares the same water. So it's
Right,
that whole
right.
thing. Um, so I mean, the choices they make in terms of um, how they allocate the spaces is just so different from Britain, where we
Right.
have lots of bedrooms with en suites, especially the new buildings, which
Y
I'm not keen on that idea, but
Yeah, it's like, I've got this 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house with a double garage and all this kind of thing, and, like, people in Japan are just like, "What? Why do you need 2 or 3 bathrooms?"
yeah, I mean, things like I watch lots of space saving ideas, and lots of them are
Mm,
in Japan, where space has become such a premium in the cities.
mm.
So folding beds and movable storage units and this kind of thing. I love all like making space really efficient. Is
Yeah, yeah,
is quite an
yeah.
attractive idea.
Yeah. So it is really interesting how they maximize the space that they've got, but also how quickly you can get used to it. Like if I go back to Australia to my mum's place, I'm just like, I don't understand how Like I look around, and to me now, it just looks like this is way too much cleaning.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Mm,
we've got a fold down bed in our apartment, and it makes so much sense because in the daytime you get your space back. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
my son can leave Lego all over the floor, and then at the end of the day, we fold the bed down, and the Lego can stay all on the floor. And it,
Mm,
so it's the idea that you've got a fixed bed um, in a room that's completely useless in the daytime
right.
um, seems a bit silly to me now. But going back to kind of the nature thing. I mean, I grew up in the Lake
Mm,
District, and I mentioned to Rebecca, I used to go camping in Tilbuth Way. There was a quarry there, um, or there is a quarry where there's still lots of
mm,
quarries around the lakes. And, we used to camp wild, make fires and things like that. And then I remember the moment where we realized that we couldn't do it anymore because it's all national park now. And they've got someone who looks after the national park, and it's got signs
uh,
saying no wild camping. And I remember that moment where I thought, oh, that's a shame, because it was such a great childhood, being able to, and I was in the scouts, so I was used to kind of roughing it, camping. And
mm,
that moment when you realize you can't do that anymore because unless you get permission, and
right.
all the other campsites are just shortcut grass, no campfires allowed.
Mm,
Perhaps
mm,
might be allowed one if you raise it off. You've got to be very careful about not burning the grass and this kind of thing. And then just our wilderness is being slowly but surely taken away from us or just encroached upon, by big
it's,
town kind of housing estates.
right. Yeah. I think it's very much the same as what's happening in Australia. Um, I I don't think I'd recognize the town that I moved away from 20 years ago if I went back now, because I've just heard they're just constantly opening housing estates, constantly upgrading the roads and all this kind of thing. So, yeah, there's probably not a lot of nature left, except for what people can put in their small front yard. Yeah.
Yeah. My feeling is a lot of that is to do with the design of the houses, especially in Britain. I mean, typical two up, two down
Mm.
in the middle of the plot with a tiny front garden at the front, a bit bigger garden at the back.
Like a hyacinth bucket house or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Although those would probably be bigger now from those days.
Oh, wow.
And houses are getting more and more small. They're getting smaller all the time with the space. We've got some space standards, but it's all about how much profit. Obviously, the developer-led kind of lots of these houses are developer-led, so it's about maximizing profit. And yeah, that's so. And with the lockdown, I'm not interested in designing those kinds of houses. I'm interested in all the things that I think, all aspire to do, which is get that connection back with nature. In the
Mm.
lockdown, I remember when we had, there were no cars around because no one was driving and it was quiet and everyone talks about, oh, it was lovely, wasn't it? There were some nice things that came out of lockdown. That was the
Right,
silence that we all gained.
right.
And I remember hearing the foxes that, run around Edinburgh in the streets. I've since visiting Net, obviously, I know I've walked around Net. I've taken some photos. Maybe I'll put some in this video just to show people.
Mm.
What you get is a sense of what the land might look like if it were just left to recover on its own with the free roaming animals,
Right.
being able to exhibit their natural behaviors without being, fenced in or caged. Um,
Mm, mm.
and it just really stimulates the mind into thinking how our landscape might look so differently if we just let nature take hold again.
Right.
And so as an architect, I look at that landscape and I imagine some houses in that landscape. Um, and then it begs the question, well, they would have to be designed differently, these houses, because typical two up, two down, like we've just described, wouldn't suit that landscape. So yeah, since the lockdown and since being on the carnivore diet
Mm.
and seeing NEP, where they have free roaming animals, which is such a lovely setting, to see the
Mm.
animal. You're buying the meat, you're buying the beef from NEP
Right.
or any other regenerative farm, and they've had, excuse me, a really as natural as possible life.
Mm.
And then I started to just think, how can we just support this model of farming,
Right.
and how might our housing change in that new setting?
Mhm.
So I've contacted some farmers. I'm contacting people generally to try to just get this discussion going,
Right.
um, and looking at the architectural side, but also the metabolic health side.
Right.
Because obviously, when we're closer to nature, and I know that intuitively, having done lots of camping and walking and climbing in my life, when we're in touch with nature, it's just good for our health. I think
Right.
we
Right.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I've got you on the line right now, so perhaps just delve in, a bit more into the Japan, because I look at Japan as like a model of how Britain might become in terms of the densification of it.
Oh,
Um,
really?
well, I think so. I mean,
Mm.
when I look back at my time in the Lake District, I used to go out to places like Langdale's, and go for walks, and you wouldn't see anybody on that walk.
Mm.
And now,
Mm.
you're queuing up often to walk up
Right.
some of the steeper paths to the summit. There are just more people. I mean,
Right.
the
Right.
roads are busier. And when I think of my early times when I was learning to drive, the roads are just so much more busy now. You can't overtake anymore. There's no point because, there's six,
Right.
7 cars in front of you. Just feel that increase in population just within my lifetime. So it's
Mm.
really heightened my sensitivity to how do we make sure that, because we will continue to um, expand, that we on the land we'll need more houses, more people
Right.
will
Mm.
arrive or be born here. So it feels like an urgent topic to talk about. How can we make sure we allow this development to happen in a good way, and
Mm.
not at
Mm.
the exclusion of nature? So,
Right.
I mean, do you get to the countryside much yourself?
No.
No.
No. I like just work-wise, family-wise, other things, just it prevents me kind of getting out of the city. Um, but Japan, just thinking about planning and housing and facilities and that kind of thing. Japan, especially in the major cities, does so well with that kind of thing because their whole system is done a little bit differently to the way it's done in the UK or Australia. So, like, you've been in Osaka, like, there's lots of train stations and lots of lines and lots of different companies running train lines in Japan, and all of them make money. They're all profitable. And that's unheard of in the UK or Australia or America, right? You don't own public transport companies and make money, right? It's just you make a loss. That's the way it works, right? Um, and that's even before you take into account the fare evasion, which doesn't happen here, but that's not why they're making money. The reason they're making money here is because all all the major stations, the um the train companies own a lot of that land around the stations, and they develop the station into shopping malls and complexes and sometimes apartments and stuff, all very close to the station, so that they're actually managing all this real estate and making all this money from this real estate, and people are enticed to go there because it's easy to travel there because they can get there on the train, and it's just this kind of thing that maintains momentum the whole time.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's how they've kind of built these very dense cities all around stations.
And does that leave the countryside untouched then?
It's not hard to get out to nature here.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean the countryside is untouched here because basically you've got a city which is in the valley, and then they can't develop anything else, because it's just the rest is mountains, But Osaka is a bad example because yeah, it's just like they threw concrete on it. But Tokyo's got heaps of green space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kobe is like, if you've ever been to, I always think Kobe is like a mix between Melbourne and Sydney, the way it looks, wide streets, modern buildings, but lots of kind of those old Art Nouveau kind of style buildings that kind of, yeah.
And what about the farming side of it? Are you able to get regeneratively raised meat in Japan?
Not easily.
Is it mostly kind of grain fed and
Yeah.
factory
So
farm?
because that when Japanese people are shopping, they're looking for meat that aesthetically looks good, you know? They're not looking at that going, "Oh, well, that fat's a bit yellow and it's grass fed." They're not going, "Oh, it's a bit yellow. That means it's healthier." They're going, "Oh, it's a bit yellow. That looks a bit disgusting. I don't want that. I want the nice white fat on my meat and I want it all the way through and, marbled through it and whatever." And that's what happens with the grain fed beef when you're kind of massaging the cows and all this kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's more about how it looks to the consumer than whether it's healthy or not. So regenerative stuff is not that big here.
Yeah, okay. And I think it's taking traction here, the
Mm.
regeneratively farmed.
Well,
And
and I saw an article that people have been sharing recently from a newspaper in the UK saying like beef sales are off the charts because people are worried about their health or something.
right, I haven't seen that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think there's still the push for a plant-based diet and reduction of meat. That's
Mm.
that's the message I still feel is quite strong here. We still have meat-free day in the week at schools,
Right.
which, you know, I now don't like the idea of, obviously. Um,
Mm. And, apart from anything, the fact that it's better for the environment is a complete lie.
well, I mean, it's obvious. Just go and visit NEP and you'll see.
Right.
You can
Exactly.
see, yeah, it's clear as day. I mean,
Yeah.
the cows are walking around, their physical interaction with the ground, and this is described in the documentary in the book that Isabella Tree did.
Mm.
They're actually speeding up the regeneration of the land just through their presence.
Right.
Um, and when you see all the animals together on the land,
Mm.
it's just as clear as day that they are meant to be there, and them, putting dung onto the ground is going straight into the ground, making the soil healthy. And then if
Mm.
you pair that with a monocrop field that's growing just wheat, it's
Yeah.
it's like black and white.
Yeah. I mean, and, you see Bill Gates with making his fake meat and stuff, or his butter made out of thin air and whatever. And he's like, well, it's much better for the environment than the cows. And it's like, how? How can that possibly be better for the environment? It's got to be produced in a factory somewhere. Where is all that pollution going? You
Yeah.
know? So,
Yeah, I mean, I asked ChatGPT because the question on my mind earlier on was, can you feed the world if everybody changed to a carnivore diet? Because I just thought
mm,
it was interesting. And I had to challenge it on some things, because obviously it came saying that, I think one of the things it said was that assumed that carnivores were eating a kilo of meat a day or something.
mm,
Which I don't get anywhere near that. I don't know about yourself. I'm a year and 6 months on this new carnivore lifestyle, and I don't eat anywhere near that amount.
Yeah, I couldn't eat 2 kilos or a
Oh, wow,
kilo rather.
kilo, even a
A
kilo,
kilo,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing half a kilo probably.
Yeah. So that was my first response to ChatGPT. You know, was,
Mm.
well, actually, I don't eat that much. I weigh this much. This is how much I eat based on that. Um, and, you know, in the end, after a few questions, maybe I'll publish this one day. It said that perhaps it was possible that the whole of
Oh,
with the current population, was it 8 billion or something? Perhaps it might be possible to feed everybody on a carnivorous lifestyle. Uh,
mm,
that's bandied around a lot. Well, of course, you couldn't, not everybody could do that because it's just, you know, it wouldn't be possible to feed everyone. And therefore, we must eat a plant based diet because that's the only sustainable model. But I just don't think anyone has actually really proven that either way.
it it works for short-term profits. I think that's why it's, you know, the people that are saying, "We have to go this way, we have to go this way," they're filling their bank account up at the expense of everyone else, and they're gonna be gone before it becomes a problem.
Yeah. When I was into forest gardening and I was
Mm,
looking at growing plants in a different way from, in a more sustainable way, I bought some books by Martin Crawford,
mm.
and he's got a little film. It's called Forest Gardening the Movie. It's on YouTube. And someone asks him about, is it, you know, yes, but could you feed everybody with the forest gardening principles? And he says, that's the wrong question. He says, people should be asking what is sustainable and what is then a sustainable population. And I think that kind of rings true for the carnivore lifestyle as well, I would
Mm,
suggest. Um, that really we should just be saying what is the best way to rear our animals and support the population so that the animals grow, our environment recovers, uh,
mm,
we can improve the quality of our soils, and we should be focusing on that, you know, and then we'll just see what is a
right.
sustainable population once we've looked at that.
I remember a guest telling me once that, I can't remember these exact words, but it was along the lines of, "For this to work for everyone, we need to get away from the current idea of the centralized distribution of food the way we currently have it. And it has to be like farms managed locally for the local population. And then that local farm just worries about their local population. And then outside of that, that's worried about by some other local population."
What do you think are the barriers to that happening?
Probably a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
Probably.
I straight away thinking that how much, you know, the government and councils are so desperate to take control of everything.
Well, I think they're the barrier to whatever happens, you know? Like, because, you know, it doesn't really matter what country you go to, like, the governments are just so desperate to get more and more control, you know? Um,
You'd say that's the
but,
same in Japan then?
um, to a degree, I think, um, there's a few things I think that are a bit different about Japan. One of them is, like, nothing really ever changes here, right? Culture is so strong here. Like, Japan's still a very homogenous society, right? Like, immigration levels haven't gone crazy like they have in UK, Australia, America. So, it's a very strong culture. And when you've got a very strong culture, things don't change
Yeah.
very quickly, because when someone wants to change something, there's a lot of cultural implications to making that change. You know, I'm trying to think of a good example, but like, I don't know, let's say they wanted to ban the use of something, you know, whatever it is.
Mm.
There would be, you know, there would be a lot of uproar from certain factions, like, but if you ban this, then we can't do this anymore, you know, or whatever. It could be as simple as public drinking is going to be banned. that's gonna have a cultural impact in Japan because that's normal here. And yeah, public drinking's kind of not the same as it is in like it doesn't get out of control like it would in the UK or Australia, you know. Um, so yeah, if they wanted to ban something like that, there'd be a lot of people kind of against it. But
Yeah.
and that's just a silly example. But that's why culture doesn't change so much here,
I
or
remember when
politicians don't change.
I remember when looking back at some of the Greek friends that I've got, and they were talking about how the EU wanted to ban some of their foods. One particular, they had a fermented meat that was a traditional food, and it didn't meet the latest health and safety guidelines
Mm,
that the EU had set, and so there was a lot of kickback from that. And I remember the person who I spoke to at the time was like, "We're never going to stop. They can say whatever they want,
right.
legislate for whatever they want, but we'll always eat that because it goes back thousands of years. That kind of
Yeah. That's the same kind of way it would happen here, you know? Yeah.
yeah." Um, I've lost my train of thought now. Um, let's look at my notes. We're kind of running out of time. I'm sure there's loads I'd like to talk to you more about. Yeah, just let me try and work my way back into something meaningful. Looking at the landscape,
Mm,
um, about how we might. I mean, by encouraging people to at least consider the carnivore way of life, and
right.
showing them that the narrative that has been set, which is that eating meat is bad for the environment, showing them that it doesn't have to be that way. It's only because of the way that much of the animals are being raised, and all the problems that are associated with that. If you move to a regenerative model, it's absolutely sustainable, and I would argue is one of the ways that we can fight the problems that we've got with our carbon emissions, if you believe
Mm,
carbon emissions,
right.
and climate change, because I think nature is best placed to solve these problems if we just give it a chance to recover.
Exactly. I think, you can look at nature like the human body. The human body is best placed to do the repair of the human body, not pharmaceutical companies. And the same with nature. It's best positioned to actually cure itself.
I'm embarrassed to say that at the age of 50, that the profound nature of what you've just said has really only just sunk in. Do you know what I mean? When you're
Right.
talking about the body is best equipped to heal itself, I remember people telling me that before, but it's never really been. I don't think I've ever really realized it to the extent that I understand it now.
Yeah.
People talk about antioxidant foods, and but you realize that the body has its own mechanism for antioxidants.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's I mean, I'm the same. I wouldn't have thought about this at all before, you know? It's only since coming into this space, and, um, when you realize that it's one of those things you realize, then it's like everything now is through that prism, and it's like when you look at things and you think, half of this is just this giant money-making scheme, you know? And no wonder you get pressured so much to go on particular types of drugs like, statins and all this kind of thing, because it's money.
yeah. Well, perhaps that's a good place to wrap up because I know you've got another appointment on the hour. But it'd be lovely to chat to you again, perhaps in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for having me on, Adam. Really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. You start. I was going to use those words to try and throw it. Yeah, to end the session, but you've done it for me. So
Cheers. It's force of habit.
yeah, thank
Cheers.